regarding the UAP topic, it's been a little dicey for some folks. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
Several years ago, I
Yeah.
was warned by certain people to be very careful what I say. Some of those individuals now, as you probably know, some of those individuals who I had a chance to either work with or know are now missing or unfortunately dead. And so there is an ongoing FBI investigation, full field investigation into this. There is a reason why I live where I live with 5 German Shepherds and I'm heavily armed. Maybe it's, call it paranoia if you want, but there's an old saying, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. But I'm doing well. I'm doing quite well. And I'm very happy, very content, especially with where we are right now in the conversation regarding disclosure. There's a lot happening behind the scenes that I think, frankly, your audience may be very surprised to hear.
Well, I've got to be honest, this is the craziest set of questions I've ever put together for any interview. And if it was any other moment in time throughout history, this would be effectively the end of both of our careers. But in fact, we're just commenting on what's going on in Congress, what's going on with our president, and what's going on in the mainstream media, which feels insane. So I want to get to the missing scientists. But before we do, I need to show you this clip of Congressman Tim Burchett on Newsmax. I'm not going to say another word. Team, SOT 2, please.
Former colleague of yours, Matt Gaetz, making some pretty shocking statements yesterday about aliens. Take a look.
I had someone come and brief me who was in a military uniform, worked for the United States Army, that was briefing me on the locations of hybrid breeding programs where captured aliens were breeding with humans to create some hybrid race that could engage in intergalactic communication. Aliens that were living were in forced breeding programs with humans that had been abducted from war zones and from even the caravans of migrants.
All right. I mean, I don't have the tinfoil hat on just yet, Congressman, but I'm wondering, kind of how you react to that, because you are connected. You're on the UFO subcommittee. I mean, I'm just wondering what you make of that. Have you heard anything like that?
Well, I'm still a member of Congress, so I can't really comment too much on what Matt said. But I will say this.
Wait, seriously? Are you being serious, or is that tongue-in-cheek?
I'm being 100% serious. Okay. I've been 100% serious. I've been briefed by just about every alphabet agency there is. And I'll just tell you this, if they would release the things that I've seen, you would stay up, you'd be up at night worrying about or thinking about this stuff. We just need to disclose it all. I'm sick of it. I was briefed. I'll just tell you this. I was briefed last week on an issue, 2 weeks ago. And it would have set the earth on. This country would have come unglued, I think, if they would have heard all that I heard. They would demand answers.
Okay, so where do we start? Should we start with an alien hybrid breeding program where they're capturing caravans of immigrants and forcing them into this? Or should we start with the fact that a congressman who is well respected thinks that if this is fully disclosed, it's going to set the country on fire? I'm going to hand this one over to you here. I'm speechless.
Sure. Well, first of all, I've had the privilege of speaking to Representative Tim Burchett and his colleagues, and what he's saying regarding access to very sensitive information, he's absolutely correct. Some of the people that briefed those individuals, I personally know. They were colleagues of mine back in the day. He's absolutely correct that some of the population, I think, would probably be potentially concerned about how much we know about this topic, and for several reasons. We can go into that. Now, as far as this notion of alien crossbreeding and hybridization, let me just preface this. When I was in the Pentagon at AATIP, I was a nuts and bolts kind of guy, so really airframe, air integrity, the material science and propulsion behind the vehicles themselves, not so much the occupants. But what Gates is referring to is something called, in the vernacular, it's known throughout kind of the UFO community as MILABs. And what it suggests is that there's been a long-standing agreement or understanding between us and our friends from out of town that have allowed us to work with whatever these are, in a cooperative agreement, and in exchange for that, supposedly they would have access to certain human specimens biologically in order to test. I have to say, first and foremost, I heard about that while I was at the Pentagon. I was not privy to the specifics of that. From my understanding, that relationship began, if it is true, began sometime in the 1950s. And has continued. I have met several individuals, former intelligence officers for the Air Force and other services, who swear by it, who actually say they've had encounters with UAP and have seen military personnel in and around the vehicles, and as if, very nonchalant, as if it was supposed to be. I have to be careful with going into any type of speculation about hybridization or any type of scientific study or research, because, again, that was not my forte. But what I will say is I've had plenty of individuals tell me verbatim that the military is far more, the military-industrial complex is far more involved in this topic than anyone really knows. There are cases which seem rather interesting, where you have, in some cases, UAP potentially being escorted by American fighter jets and allied fighter jets. So that would give you some sense of cooperation, maybe between us and whatever they are. So let's get back to the question you're having, specifically about hybrids and alien hybrids. I don't know. I do know that there are people out there that swear by it. There are people that have been in the military and intelligence officials that have told me it, that have no reason to question their credibility. They've never lied to me, certainly. But I don't have firsthand knowledge of that, of hybridization or forced hybridization. And if that is the case, then I think Representative Burchett is absolutely correct, because if it's true that there's a scenario where we have elements of the American government wittingly cooperating with something else and allowing human beings to be, against their own will, right, be taken. Well, from my perspective, when I was a special agent, that's called kidnapping, right? That's a felony offense. And then if they are touched in any way, right, that's called assault, right? So there's a lot of issues here that legally, fundamentally, I think we would have a problem with. Then you have the other information that I know Representative Burchett has had access to, along with some of his other colleagues like Luna and Burleson. That could be very disturbing, because it shows that maybe we have been a little bit more complicit with this topic than we have previously stated. Keep in mind, we spent decades saying nothing to see here, folks. It's not real. This is not, this is silly. Turns out we were spending a lot of taxpayer money, a lot of your money, actually, researching this topic, and I was part of that effort, and so were many of my colleagues. And it turns out that, there are things that go bump in the night, and that can be very disturbing for some people, especially from a philosophical perspective or a theological perspective, and even a psychological perspective.
Okay, so two things jump out at me right away that make me struggle with this. Number one, genetically, how in the world could you possibly sync up humanity and whatever this non-intelligence may be? It'd be like crossbreeding us with a dog, I imagine. And a dog has evolved on Earth. It doesn't make sense, Lou. How would that even be possible?
No, that's a great question. In fact, we've already done it before with other things. We've actually crossbred rats and their DNA with jellyfish, and now these rats glow. There's bioluminescence. Imagine that, a glowing rat, right, or a glowing sheep. So we've already done that, actually. From a scientific perspective, it's not that hard. And frankly, when you look at the genetics, I think we share something like 90% of our DNA with a banana, right? So it's not really that far off. We are already crossbreeding to bring animals back from extinction, like the dire wolf, right? So we are well beyond that. Can we take DNA from something else and mix it with human DNA? Yes, it can be done. We've already done it with animals, and that's common knowledge. Anybody can get on a search engine and type in, glow in the dark rats or glow in the dark sheep, and you will see where we have crossbred jellyfish DNA with mammalian DNA. And I suspect in China they've gone much further than that. There are ethical issues with it, but I think scientifically, when you're saying how do we crossbreed, it can be done. And I'll also suggest something else very interesting you said, because Jillian, I think it's a really important question you're asking here. How can you take DNA that is terrestrial here from Earth, and fine, you can argue the fact that maybe jellyfish are from Earth, and so therefore there's some similarity with something completely not human. But we don't know that. It is possible that there is some sort of linkage there, maybe either in our distant history, in our past, where these things are not so dissimilar. Look, they've been reported for having bilateral symmetry, having two arms, two legs, very similar to humanoid type morphology. That suggests a lot of things. Either A, the human form is very, very common in the cosmos, or B, that there's a common link somewhere between human beings and potentially higher primates and whoever these are. And if you go down that logic trail, then you have to ask a question that maybe our friends from out of town aren't really from outer space at all. Maybe they're from right here. Maybe they are from under our oceans. Maybe these things are just as natural to Earth as we are, but we're now at the point technologically where we can actually begin to interact with them. So that's another potential.
Okay, and that does make sense, because for most of my life, when contemplating whether or not these creatures could be real, because, you and I have talked about how as a kid I saw the gray on Whitley Strieber's book Communion, scared the hell out of me, and I talked myself out of it because I was like, a creature from another planet the gravity's going to be different. Like we go to the moon and we bounce around because there's no gravity. Or if we went to a much bigger planet, we'd be like 500 pounds or something. We'd be flattened because the gravitational pull is so much greater, right? So
Absolutely.
In other words, they wouldn't be acclimated to the gravity of our planet. They might be flying off. They might be flattened to the ground, depending upon whatever they're acclimated to. They're not acclimated to breathe air, and they're not wearing space suits. So it can't be real. But yet it somehow arguably seems to be. Now, having said that, I want to get to the different theories about that in a minute, but having said that, why in the world would our government cooperate with kidnapping humans? Okay, so Lou, I'm just walking through how crazy this is, right? When these non-human intelligence creatures have arguably been just abducting people for hundreds of years. And arguably, in one of the books, I guess, that they left out of the Bible, the book of Ezekiel, they talk about lights in the sky and getting in chariots and going up into the stars. Why would we even need to cooperate with this? It doesn't even make sense. They could just grab one of us and go.
Sure. Well, if these things are truly intelligent and not just automatons, then one can surmise that there might be some sort of social structure there, meaning some sort of cooperation. And why I say that is because if you look at all higher primates in the animal kingdom, if you want a species to survive, you have to learn how to cooperate as a unit, as a group, right? So whether it's a tribe, it's a village, it's a city, it's a country, it's a nation, it doesn't matter. Cooperation is really important for the survival of a species from a macro perspective, not a micro perspective, but a macro perspective. So it is possible that the idea of cooperation isn't just a terrestrial thing, that it is a universal kind of like perhaps other things we see, like the behavior of light, for example, is just a matter of physics. It's possible that in order for any type of intelligent being to really evolve itself, cooperation amongst themselves and amongst others is imperative. The question is, what would that cooperation look like? And there's been a lot of speculation on that. And I think you're absolutely right. If it turns out that the American government or any government has been complicit in allowing citizens, innocent civilians, to be taken against their own will and studied, then that's a constitutional issue. We're now well beyond the lanes of MK Ultra and some of these horrible things that our government has done in the past. This is a new level, and there'd be, I think, a significant amount of liability that the American government would have to assume, and maybe this is one of the reasons why there have been some people very shy about it. In the past, we did a lot of things at the height of the Cold War to maintain our strategic advantage and competitiveness against then Soviet Union. There's a lot of things we did that weren't very nice. You know, if we can go again back to the MK Ultra experiments where innocent people wound up dying because the CIA decided to administer LSD to unsuspecting people, right, just to see what would happen. You had the Tuskegee experiments where we allowed our own human beings, our own brothers and sisters in this country, to be infected with and go through the entire life cycle of syphilis to the point where some of them died. And even though we had a cure, we didn't offer the cure because we wanted to see what would happen with syphilis going to its natural state of progression. So, you know, there have been things we have done in our government that haven't always been very nice and not necessarily in the best interests of the American people. And this is why I think, you know, Congress continues to get engaged in this, because if it turns out that that is the case, then we're going to have ourselves an entirely different conversation here.
Okay. And the one thing that I feel like I should clarify at this point is the suggestion is not that these creatures are copulating with human beings. It would be that they're capturing us, studying us, extracting our DNA, and crossing it with theirs in a lab, like the way that we genetically engineer food is kind of what you're saying. Not like, okay, I get the science now when you put it that way, like a GEO, I understand it when it comes to making a tomato sit on a shelf for a month because it is the gene
Correct.
of some sort of Arctic fish. I got it. Okay,
Exactly.
I'm with you there.
And I think it's a great point you make, because there's been speculation that perhaps these things don't necessarily want to clone and hybrid and look like us and be like us and act like us, thank God. But perhaps it's that they've lacked something as a perhaps reproductive capability, right? So they're looking at, okay, well, humans are very prolific. They obviously know how to reproduce. Maybe there's something in human DNA that allows us to find that way where we can now, you know, reproduce again. Perhaps they've lost their ability to reproduce. We simply don't know. And again, this is mere speculation here. So let me just put this out there, that right now, these are just, if you were to go down the scientific avenue of why something would want to crossbreed with human beings, you know, we are a very adaptive creature. We can live on virtually all 7 continents on this planet. We can swim, we can run, we can crawl, and we do a lot of things pretty well. We do have an incredible ability to adapt. We're found from northern snow regions all the way down into the deserts, and human beings can thrive. There's only a few places where human beings can thrive. We're even in outer space right now with the space station, right? Even underwater, you have these hotels underwater where people can scuba dive, and you know, we are masters of our environment. And maybe there's something there that's interesting or enticing to something that is definitively not human, and say, hey, these little furry monkeys over here have found a way to, you know, do certain things that we can't. Maybe there's something there that we want to look into. You know, there's a whole bunch of reasons. Why do we study right now genetically cows? We do it all the time, right? Why do we study the animals that we do, whether it's a great white shark in the Pacific Ocean or you know, a buffalo on the African Serengeti?